Hello there, I'm Jana Eubank. I have my October 2023 hip kits in hand and I couldn't wait to dive into them. Look at these beautiful pattern papers. I've selected out several here that went with the colors of my photo that I'm working with today. And then I'm going to use a piece of the Calc cardstock from the cardstock kit as my base. Now I loved so many of these pattern papers and so I decided to create a messy mat around this photo. I'm using some of these busier papers and when I do that I just like to add a little slice of them peeking out, and so that is why I decided to go with this little messy mat. What is a messy mat? A messy mat is just a word that I call a mat that you offset a bunch of pattern papers around. So you can see that I have a piece of that Colors of Change tree paper off to the left. I'm actually using the back side of that, which is that yellow stripedy mesh type pattern, also on the left side. And then I'm going to counterbalance that with a piece of this Colors of Change paper. Actually, this is called Slice of Heaven paper. That's the circles paper, offset to the right. I just loved all of these bold patterns. I thought they were very masculine and they went with not only the picture of my son, but the colors of the photo as well. So after I get this all stacked up, just look how cute that looks. I love it. It really highlights the photo and calls your attention to it. The next thing I'm going to do is to create some vertical layers on my page using that wood grain paper that's called Wouldn't You Believe It, and then that yellow tile type paper which is called Celebrate Together. So I'm just eyeballing about how big of a piece I want for each of these, and I'm going to trim those out with my trimmer. I will rip the bottom of that wood paper, which is just such a fun texture to add to a fall page. And then I will go ahead and cut out a piece of that yellow paper as well. So it's really, the hardest part of getting a new kit, I think, is cutting into the papers because you just want to preserve them and use them forever and ever. But you just got to dive in and start cutting. Or if you're like me, you got to grab that extra pattern paper kit so you have two of every paper. Now, I really was drawn to this leaf background stamp that was released this month. Unfortunately, it's already sold out and I can see why it's beautiful. So I wanted to use it on the background of this page, and I wanted to do like some really subtle background. So I decided to do white paint. Now I haven't stamped with paint for a really long time, so I kind of struggled with this a little bit. I did ink up my stamp using a brayer. And actually the paint was drying really quickly, and so I was able to get a few images on there. They're kind of messy, but that's okay. I just wanted a really subtle look. But what I was more concerned about was getting back over to the sink and cleaning off my stamp because I did not want that acrylic paint to stick to my stamp and ruin it. I definitely want to use that stamp again for sure. So I love the way the stamping looks. The one thing I wish I would have changed is I wish I would have done it more to the left, because as I do embellish around my photo, a lot of it gets covered up and you barely see it in the final result. But that's okay. So I just mentioned that in case you decide to do or recreate this layout, you may want to stamp more towards the left. Now in the embellishment kit are these awesome oversized titles and chipboard pieces. They are amazing, and I knew that I wanted to use one for my title. I thought that I might also use these house shapes from the same pack, but when I pulled in this tag from the cardstock die cuts in the main kit, I knew that they were too close in color, so I decided to use the wood veneer houses from the embellishment kit instead. Plus, I love that wood grain texture, especially for fall, and I love the way that it ties back in to that wood grain pattern paper that I already have in the background of my page design. I'm now just going to flip through some of these die cuts from the main kit and pick out a few pieces to accent the design I already have going on here. I pulled out that yellow tab that I'm going to add to the right of my photo. I grabbed the little squirrel that I thought was cute to place up by the photos or by the houses, and then I also grabbed that navy so grateful washi phrase there because I loved the navy color and I wanted that to tie back in with the photo of my son. So next up, I'm grabbing the vellum leaves from the main kit, and I wanted to create some layering behind these house embellishment clusters. So I'm picking out a navy leaf, a teal leaf, it's kind of a teal green leaf, and then an orange leaf for each of those clusters. I also went and grabbed the die sets, and I'm going to cut out, or I did cut out, several of the skeleton leaves from the layered leaf die, and then I also cut out several branches using the other die. it has a longer name. Let me see what it's called. The Frame, Tag, Clipboard, and Leaves Set. So I have those sitting off to the side. I added a little bit of white twine to the top of my tag, and now I'm going to start assembling these embellishment clusters. So first I added down those vellum leaves, and now I'm tucking in the skeleton leaves just to layer them up. And I love the way that they pop against that color of the vellum leaves. I'm also tucking in some of the branches. I love that the branches are more solid in nature so that they just stand out against those skeleton leaves, and then just add, a variety of shapes to these embellishment clusters. Now I'm adding the vellum leaves using some glue dots. I'm just putting one glue dot on the very tip, and because the tip will be hidden behind the photo mat there. And then I'm also using the glue dots on the wood veneers to get them in place. For the skeleton leaves, I'm just dotting on some liquid glue. It can get messy if you move your shape around, but this particular glue that I'm using dries pretty matte, and so you don't notice it in the final result. Now this is where I kind of cover up that stamping, but it's okay. It still looks good. And I like the way that the skeleton leaves actually tie back into that stamping, so that worked out well. Now as I stack on these wood veneer houses, the first one is placed directly to the page, but I did have to pop up the second one using some foam squares because I kind of overlapped them a little bit. So I wanted to bring that second one up to the same height as the first one as I overlapped them. So next I'm going to do some stamping with the Pocket Life stamp on this tab. I just wanted to add a little phrase here. I'm actually going to use this Pocket Life stamp quite a bit. That one is sold out if you want to purchase it separately, but it is still available in the Pocket Life kit. So be sure to grab it. It's a really cute stamp. So next I knew I had to use one of these large oversized titles. My assignment was to add some stitching to my page. I have already machine stitched around that yellow layer in the background. You can see there off to the left, but I also thought it would be fun to add some hand stitching to this chipboard title. So I just pierced some holes through it on a foam mat, and then I started to hand stitch it with some embroidery floss. Now as I worked with it, it started to weaken because that script font is quite delicate, and so I could tell that my chipboard piece was starting to get worn out. So I decided to end up adhering it or gluing it with liquid glue directly to my page. I re-pierced the holes into the page, and then I finished off the stitching that way. If you do this, I would suggest gluing that title directly to your page from the beginning, and I think that would work out a lot better. So I did add a couple of staples to the top of that tag to the twine so that it wouldn't be flopping around. So I have a little bit of stapling on the tab and then a little bit on the tag, and I think that is a fun additional texture to this page. Of course, I wanted to create a third leaf cluster, and so I decided to do that by the title just to add a pop of color there. So I went ahead and did the same thing there, and now I'm bringing in some of the Cape Cod Coral Magicals from the color kit to do a little bit of sprinkling. I wanted it to be really subtle, and so I did water it down quite a bit and then just splash that across the top left, bottom right, and then the top right corners of the page. While that's drying, I'm going to go over and do a little bit more stamping. Now I was thinking I wanted to add some of these navy flowers stamped directly to my background page, but I wasn't sure if I would like it. So what I decided to do was stamp some out on some white cardstock first and fussy cut it, and that way I could kind of audition the shape where I thought it might go before I stamped it on my page, and that worked out really well. I also stamped out a pumpkin, but I don't end up using that. I only use the flowers here. So I'm using the chipped sapphire distress oxide that's just from my stash to stamp these flowers, and then I'm going to use the brush corduroy brown color for the center, and they're so cute. I love how these flowers look. I'm actually glad I stamped out those little flowers ahead of time too on the white cardstock, because I do end up using them. I layer them on top of the photos to just tie back into the other ones that are stamped on the page. Now, I also wanted to stamp this word season above the squirrel's head for my title. So my title would be fall season. However, when I went to stamp it, the acrylic block kind of bumped into that wood veneer and kind of bumped into the chipboard piece and really smeared that word. And so it wasn't a very clean stamped image. So I just decided to create another one on a piece of white cardstock, and then I just adhere that right on top. I also added in those fussy cut flowers, and then I thought I needed a little more color to the left of that top left corner of the photo. So I just tucked in another one of those vellum branch die cuts there. So I think that looks really good. The next thing I'm going to do is to underline my title with one of the phrase strips from the Pocket Life kit. So I'm just cutting them apart here. My battery goes dead, so you don't see me adhere it, but there it is already in place. I placed an orange one and a brown one, and I think that looks really good. I'm going to add some journaling strips to the bottom right corner of my layout, as well as to the left of the title, and then I'm going to come back in with some more wood veneer. I have two sets, I guess, or clusters of wood veneer on the page, and just using that, design principle of the rule of thirds, I knew I needed it in one more little spot. So I went back to the package and found these 3 little hearts, and I just lined them up in a cute little row to the right of my journaling at the bottom of the page. Now, the final thing I'm going to do for this layout is put something in the top left corner. I felt like it needed some color, or just to balance it. So what I decided to do is go to the cards in the Pocket Life kit, and I'm going to use the patterns from one of the 4x6 cards, as well as one of the 6x8 papers, to cut out some banner pieces. And I'm going to use a scrap of that yellow stripedy mesh pattern paper that I used in the mat earlier to create some banner pieces. So I'm just cutting out some strips here. I have a punch that cuts the end of strips into a banner shape, so I'm going to use that on the orange plaid and then that tiny floral. And then I thought I might use that yellow scrap as like an angled banner piece, but I went back over to the main kit and I found some banner stickers, and there's this really cute one that has a leaf on it. However, it wasn't tall enough to kind of, match the other banner pieces that I'd already had on my layout. So what I decided to do was adhere that to the yellow scrap of paper to make it a bit taller, and then I was able to add that at the top of the page. I ended up stapling that as well, so that gave me an opportunity to do the visual triangle rule with the stapling. So I will have stapling at the top of this leaf banner, on the twine of the tag, and then also on that tab, and that works out great. I love all the texture that I was able to add to this layout with the stapling, the skeleton leaves, the stitching, the twine, the stitching on the chipboard title. We even have wood veneer, and of course, don't forget the stamping of the flowers, and then also the background stamping that we did in the beginning. Now, if you do recreate this layout, you can see why I told you to, move that background stamping towards the left a little bit. And then also that splattering of that, the paint, the magicals, is another texture. So I just love it. Fall is all about texture to me, and I love the way this page turned out. All right, guys, come and pick up some October hip kits for yourself, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining me.